Greetings and welcome to part 5 of Wall Street's hostile takeover of America's real estate market, where we are tracing the history and evolution of Wall Street's interference in America's housing market. I'm Jen Nodine. I'm a mortgage advisor licensed in North Carolina. In our timeline, we left off in late 1981, just after Salomon Brothers has purchased $1 trillion worth of mortgage loans from the savings and loans. For the life of me, I could not understand why Salomon Brothers was the only buyer available for these mortgages when Freddie Mac had been established about a decade prior specifically to buy mortgages from savings and loans. So why didn't Freddie buy these loans from them? I dug and I dug. I could not find the answer. And it finally occurred to me the other day. Payments on these mortgages are a vital source of revenue for the savings and loans. They can't afford to sell them. They need that revenue. But the more loans they have on their books, the more reserves they're required to hold. And each one of the sharp interest rate hikes of the Volcker shock made them tap into those reserves. So they're now undercapitalized for the amount of loans on their books. The Economic Recovery Tax Act was somewhat of an accounting fraud scheme in which the savings and loans moved mortgages off of their books, probably for long enough for the regulators to come through and declare them solvent, and then they'd be able to buy them back. Because I feel pretty comfortable saying that if they had sold them to Freddie, they would have been able to buy them back, and they needed to buy them back. And this would enable them to continue operating in insolvency. And that's when it just really hit me how dirty this whole deal is. So for holding these loans on their books for a little while, Salomon Brothers made billions of dollars. Do you think that's fair? And there's no mistake. This deal is what really kicked off the savings and loan crisis. The Volcker shocks definitely pushed them towards insolvency. But in 1980, even in spite of the Volcker shock, the savings and loan industry turned a profit of almost $800 million. So they were still generating profits. They weren't actually losing money until this deal with Salomon Brothers. So 1980, they make almost $800 million. 1981, they lose $4.6 billion. And we know who found them. If they just moved them off their books and back on, it would be too obvious that this was accounting fraud. So I suspect that, selling theirs and then buying another's sort of sanitizes that. But sanitize or not, it's accounting fraud, no matter how you slice it. And I just want to point out, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that the statute of limitations on acts of fraud the clock doesn't start ticking until the fraud is actually discovered. And so far, everybody's gotten away with everything because no one has ever questioned or looked into the legitimacy of this deal before. In fact, it happened kind of quietly at the time. In 1981, I don't think most Americans knew that Salomon Brothers bought $1 trillion worth of mortgages. It wasn't on the 6 o'clock news, I can tell you that. Because I think people would have been outraged by this. I know I am now, all these years later, just finding out about it. In the immediate aftermath of this terrible deal, failures started en masse. By the end of 1982, 118 savings and loans across the nation had failed. And just this part of the fiasco cost the FSLIC $3.5 billion to resolve. So you see, Salomon Brothers sucks the billions out over here, and it costs somebody else over here. And eventually that cost trickles down to us. That's the truth about trickle-down economics. Thanks, Reagan. And one last issue. I hate to state the obvious, but they're a mortgage securities trading department. They are not a mortgage company. They don't have any banking licenses. They have absolutely no right to be buying and selling whole mortgage loans. I'm pretty sure that's a violation of a whole host of federal offenses. But after the savings and loans begin to collapse, Salomon Brothers is allowed to buy their mortgages and hold on to them. This is concerning because normally Fannie and Freddie buy the loans, they securitize, they break them up into bonds, and then turn them out to Wall Street to trade. But now Wall Street has stepped in between, and now there's no intermediary between the homeowner and Wall Street. Wall Street actually owns their mortgage. This is scary. So they enrich themselves creating the mess, and then they enrich themselves cleaning it up. They buy these mortgages from these failing savings and loans for pennies on the dollar. They just step into sweet-ass deal after sweet-ass deal. I was married for 22 years to an economically abusive spouse. I learned the hard way how to recognize economic abuse. This was economic terrorism. We're only in 1982 right now. So before the decade is out, we'll talk about how much this actually cost taxpayers. See you next time.